You are listening to the Lending Edge podcast, hosted by Scot Rose. Let's get started.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the Lending Edge podcast. Thanks for listening in. I'm excited to have a conversation with my friend and colleague, Shawn Telford. Shawn is a veteran in the real estate appraisal and collateral valuation space. His background in both real estate and technology make him very unique. Shawn is a true leader in our space, and I'm excited to share a little bit about Shawn's vision and view with all of you today. With that said, let's dive in. Hey, Shawn, how's it going this morning? Thanks for joining the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Scott, always good to be here, man. Good to see you.
You too, my friend. I know you and I get to do this quite often, actually, off camera, off podcast recording. We love to catch up and talk industry, and you're one of my favorite humans in the space, and I like to catch up with you on both personal and professional level as regular as possible. And super excited to kind of bring it out to the listeners on some of the stuff that we get going on, and love to talk about all the important things happening in our industry today. So really like to get started a little real briefly. Some of the listeners may not know a lot about your background. Maybe just give us a little bit of your history, how you got into the profession, how long you've been in the appraisal space, and including maybe some of your family history would be great.
Sure. Yeah. No, thanks for the invitation to be here, Scott. It's always good to get to talk about important things. And I know both you and I have a lot of interest in making sure the industry is successful long term. So appreciate your commitment to doing so and pushing good ideas forward. It's interesting how I got into appraising. It was certainly not an intention. I was in college, I guess was the best way to describe it. I was sort of in college, sort of not in college at the time. And my dad had always done appraising on the side, but it was something I didn't know what it was. I wasn't very interested in it. He just did the old FHA roster, if you remember that, where, you'd get one appraisal order, you do it, you turn it in, you get another kind of thing. So it was a rotation, but he enjoyed it. And he got real busy about the time I was in college and just said, "Hey, I need help." And I'm like, I wasn't very interested, but long and short of it is he was willing to pay me more than I was making at the department store. And so I ended up working for Dad. And after a few weeks, I thought I could do this. And so eventually, became licensed and certified not long thereafter, and began independently appraising on my own and really enjoyed the work. But at the same time, as I mentioned, I was in college. I finished my degree. By this time I was married and had one or maybe two kids. And I'm like, okay, I think technology is going to be a big part of the future of this profession. Not that I was some kind of, prognosticator in the late 90s when the internet and all that came to fruition. But I said, you know what, I'm going to go and get a master's degree in technology once I'd finished my bachelor's. And that really is what led me down the path that I'm on now. So, appraising, working for independently and for a bank, but then shifting to wanting to be providing the technology solutions and sources that are used by appraisers, the lending community, AMCs, and all the stakeholders is how I ended up kind of on the path that I'm on now.
No, I love that. I think you and I have always kind of shared an interest in technology and applying it to our profession. I know that for some, at times, technology can be more threatening or intimidating, and love to get in more to that today in terms of your view. And I know how much you care about the profession. You have a strong passion for the profession, especially with your history, as long as we've been in the business, and really helping to drive the industry forward in as most positive way as possible. What do you think are some of the most important and critical items right now that are facing the industry, and how would you kind of shape that up?
Good grief, that's a broad question, Scott.
Yeah.
This industry, and I'm sure others are similarly positioned, but it's obvious to those that are in it that there are a multitude of opportunities where technology can make it better. And largely that's because technology hasn't been utilized in the industry for some time in the ways that it could be, because of either policy or regulatory constraints that haven't allowed the kind of innovation and things that those of us that have a technical slant have wanted to put in place. And as you mentioned, certainly there can be fear or uncertainty around how technology will work, and that's for any industry to digest. But from when I look back at when I entered the tech part of this business, one of the big things was the data that around real estate physical characteristics, about real estate transactions and transfers. And the data had been used for decades. Data had been used by companies, and it was pulled out of appraisal documents and rekeyed into systems. And to me, that was fascinating to think of how you could take that data and use it to make the process better. Even today, for me, it's not about removing the appraiser from the process. It's about using the underlying data and structures to make the industry better, to make the tools better. And so when I see the things that we saw kind of get a little bit of a jump start during COVID, more utilization of desktop type technologies that allowed appraisers to focus more on the appraising side or the analysis side, the valuation side of the equation, and less on the data collection side. To me, those are important, directional changes that, in my opinion, we need to go to, right? There's not, and I know a lot of people feel threatened by that. We've had this conversation a lot, Scott, but to me, it's just a natural shift in the benefits of utilizing technology to make a process that's important. Collateral valuation, risk management is critical for how lenders in the secondary market assess risk and invest properly. And it's what helps to keep the interest rates low for us here, is because we have all these risk management protocols in place. But at the end of the day, we need to evolve, right? We need to take advantage of that technology and learn from how it works and doesn't work, right? Not everything works, but I'm excited for that. I'm excited for those opportunities. And so those, in a general bucket, to answer your question, those are kind of the things that excite me, is the things that utilize the data to automate processes and allow the appraisers to focus on the things that are uniquely important for them.
Maybe let's double click a little bit on property data collection. I think that's a big, there's a lot of maybe varying opinions around that, and maybe some concern from certain stakeholders. We think about data and the opportunity around this transition is really using the technologies that provide, consistency, repeatability, how comprehensive the information is that we can glean using these tools. And really, technology is now the tool to collect property data, and it has less to do so much with the human, particularly who's behind the technology. What we really want to do is gather this data in a repeatable fashion, which is important to the appraisal process. Sometimes I think one piece that it doesn't get as much attention as maybe as it should is when we create a repeatable process, not only are we improving the data being collected for the subject property, but that also provides a potential for downstream efficiencies in terms of comparing apples to apples, right? So we get more consistency in terms of how that data is being collected around each property to be utilized in the appraisal process. And we bring the property, I was with a group this week, and someone said it really well. The future of appraisals, really the properties are going to come to the appraiser versus the appraiser going to the property, in a really digital environment. And all the cool tools we have now to view information and do analysis and sitting at your computer with these great digital solutions. Why do you think it is that some appraisers are so concerned about this potential transition and transformation in our space?
At the root of it, I believe it's because they want to do a good job. They want to be, to do good at their job, appraising and understanding. And so that's where it comes from to me. I think where the challenge lies is in more so getting comfortable with those technologies and approaches in a way that appraisers realize, exactly as you described, that it's a net positive, that it's a different way than we may have operated in the past, and we can do it at least as good, if not better, using these new tools. And so if you look at the reasons why appraisers go out in the field and collect data, historically, before internet times, if you can remember that far back, you're probably not that old, Scott, but
I am,
I think there's a little gray in the beard now. But
yeah.
but at the end of the day, if you did an appraisal in the past, if you didn't go to the house, you wouldn't have enough data to even do an analysis, because there was no repository of data on the property, or the building permits, or the taxes, or the comparable sales and all the transfers through the MLSs. And we've seen the evolution of that over time to where property data is ubiquitous. It's almost crazy how much information you can find out about a house by simply putting in the address. There's just so much information out there now, and the information is reliable. It comes from sources that are verifiable. And so to me, it's more about the way that we've done it in the past being understood why, and then understanding the expectations of the customers, whether it's the secondary market investors or the lenders themselves, understanding what's important to them as they assess the risk in their collateral. Because that's what this is about in the residential space. Most times what we're talking about here is understanding the risk associated with the collateral, and understanding, what is the lender up against in that space. So, I think, again, it goes back to just getting comfortable. I mean, probably this well, I've had cars that didn't have cruise control. You probably did too. But nobody even thinks about cruise control not working now. In fact, now there's adaptive cruise control that'll stop the car for you, keep up with the car in front of you. We don't even think about that, but I'm certain that those who grew up driving without it probably didn't like it at first, or were skeptical that it would work. And then you get comfortable with it and you realize this makes driving a lot less stressful, especially adaptive cruise control. So to me, it's going through those processes which simply take time, and seeing the results as being effective and appropriate, and then we'll move past some of the initial concerns that people have that are probably based more on emotional reactions than fact. And that's not being critical of emotions, that's just human nature.
Oh, for sure. And understanding, to your earlier points, wanting to make sure they can be comfortable with the technology and the process. And sometimes I think too, a lot of these programs have only been done in test and learn type environments, and so they haven't really pushed out at scale. And I think the scale will actually help a lot in terms of getting that repeatability out there in the marketplace. I think another thing is, this is something appraisers can leverage in their business from an economics perspective. I think sometimes there's this perception that the data collection idea of hybrid appraisal is only for larger companies, corporate companies, to be able to produce, right? But the reality is, when it goes to policy, assuming it goes to policy, appraisers could utilize this in their own practice to create economics for their business. I know, that would be something I would be considering. Is we've been asking for the ability to use trainees to go and inspect properties and, build that economics back into the business. And this is a great opportunity for that. You could really scale your business and focus your talent, which you like to talk about. We'll get into here in a minute, highest and best use of the appraiser. But, what do you think about that? I mean, I think if appraisers could see the opportunity for them and also just get more accustomed to it, right? When it becomes more regular, to your point, like cruise control at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, there's the changes in the marketplace for appraisers and the way that our customers, the lenders are operating, and again, the secondary markets are operating. Change equals opportunity. It's just a fact, right? Those new approaches are going to lead to new things. The things are not going to stay status quo. Things are going to change, right? The way this industry operates will change. I think going back in history, I know growing up for me, when you went to the gas station, you got gas. Today, you go to the gas station and there's this giant convenience store with everything under the sun there. And those are great examples of business owners adapting to changes in society and changes in how things are done to ensure that they can make a profit. It's not just about selling fuel, it's about selling candy and soda pop and so forth. And similarly in the appraisal industry, as we evolve into new and different ways, there's lots of doors that are going to open and some that might close, right? I mean, that's just the nature again of the way things are. But for me, it still goes back to the foundational concept that a lender will always need to understand the collateral risk and the collateral value to make good loans and to make loans with fair pricing. So the more they know, the better. And so they're going to use every tool that they can to make sure that they understand that. And they've understood now with the ubiquitousness of data and the models that they can assess the risk related to a loan effectively in different ways than they have for the last 20 or 30 years. And so we're seeing those, as you mentioned, those pilots and tests going on, and eventually those will make their way into the policy handbook of the secondary market leaders, obviously Fannie and Freddie, who have the big market share, and that will lead to opportunities for everyone from the consumer, on down to the appraiser in the value chain.
For sure. And some of these processes, by having someone use technology to collect data on the property and being able to send that data to the appraiser. So the appraiser is now basing their opinion on data being provided to them versus data they're providing to us. I also think there's a level, which we've seen others also kind of grab onto this idea. We did something with the Brookings Institute and Oshuka Foundation where we got the Spotlight Innovator for utilizing these tools and separating the process because they saw value in mitigating the potential for bias as well by removing the appraiser from the property. Do you have any thoughts on that at all? Or
yeah, I would just say this, kind of generally speaking on that topic, Scott. I think there's a lot we can learn by taking advantage of tools that separate the data collection from the data analysis. And there's benefits certainly at times for an appraiser to go out into the field and understand things. Appraising is about valuing real estate, not personal property, not the contents. It's about valuing real estate. And in my observation, that can be done without having to go to the field to collect that data and do that analysis. So, I can see a lot of value in approaches that support that. Again, the traditional way will remain in many cases, but I see value in separating data collection from the data analysis and value opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. talk about how the traditional process will remain in many cases, and I think a lot of times advancement in technology, part of what makes it feel threatening is like, is it going to take our job away from us, right? And when is that? When does that happen? And I was with a group earlier this week. These guys and gals are all quants and engineers and PhDs, and they build AVMs and do all this cool stuff. And even they believe it's going to be really important to have a human in the process. Even with all the advancing technologies right now, the next big one is probably generative AI, right? This is a tool that it seems to be advancing more rapidly than any other technology I've seen in my lifetime, at the pace of which utilization is kind of coming into varying areas across our society and businesses, et cetera. But even with that, the appraiser is critically important to understanding certain aspects of the information that computers are just not. And there's a really important place and a role for the appraiser to play in that. And you and I have talked about this at length. You like to use the term, again, the highest and best use of your time, right? Because it's an appraisal term that we're all used to.
Sure.
Where is the highest and best use of the appraiser?
Yeah. So if you think about that question, and there's, I think, room for opinions here a little bit too. But if I look at the things that matter most in understanding the value of collateral, the things that matter most are the ability to analyze all of the disparate sets of data that come in about that property, about the market, and about what's going on in the marketplace. And to me, that is the most important part. Now, where the data is sourced from is important, but it's not the most important part. Whether that data comes from internet-based sources, a third-party data collector, or the appraiser themselves, that's important. But what's most important is that analysis piece. And even as we take it to the thinking about artificial intelligence and how those tools might bring new things we're not thinking about today into play, the ability for the appraiser to analyze the output of those tools, whether it's what we're familiar with today, an AVM, or some future state product that synthesizes AVMs and other data algorithms together. Having an appraiser who understands all of that, positioned in the sequence to ensure that the output is reliable for the purpose that it was there. To me, that's the most valuable thing that the appraiser can bring to the table. And it's, in my opinion, it's where the industry can focus for the future of where to invest their ensuring that they're positioned in that way. As I mentioned, the data collection side, while certainly it has been important and it's not going away overnight, that's much less important than it was years ago when there wasn't this ubiquitous plethora of data and tools that allow data to be collected in an entirely objective and independent manner. There's just so much that can be done there. So, to me, that's where I focus my energy as an appraiser, is how can we find and utilize those tools that solve the problems of our customers, of why they hire us. I want to produce a better, reliable tool and process, because I believe in the long term that will solidify the value of the appraiser.
What are the risks of trying to put too much emphasis on the importance of appraisers doing property data collection?
We only have so much energy, right, and so much attention in the marketplace. To me, if the 5 and 10 years from now, who knows what the technological advances will be, right? I mean, we couldn't necessarily predict where we're at today 5 or 10 years ago. I mean, it goes without saying, right? So to me, the being prepared, educated, aware, and invested in that part of the business is significant. The data collection a known process, right? We've been doing that for years. But the training we receive as appraisers, the USPAP guidance that we all follow, the licensing rules, they're focused on how to gather data, form an opinion of value, and report that opinion of value. It's not necessarily about how to properly go out to a house, right? Those are not part of our training. So to me, if we focus on the parts that are unique to us, that are today, a licensed appraiser is the only person that is authorized to form an opinion of value for use in federal transactions and so forth. So to me, that's where the most important angle should be, and less focus on the whys or the hows around the data collection.
I want to put a pin in that too, because I do want to come back to the federal transactions and where appraisals or appraisers, licensed appraisers, certified appraisers are needed. Continuing on a little bit on the property data collection path, that the fact is that the technology is advancing really quickly. It's already come a long way just in the last 3 years. Apple's now put out their kit around use of LiDAR and measurement and tools, and we're starting to see some other companies come out with applications leveraging that. It used to be that we had to send all this data to the cloud, develop a point cloud. Someone had to get in there and help process the information to generate these floor plans. We're now at a point where you can generate that floor plan on the phone in real time. You no longer have to do the processing post capture. It's happening very quickly. The technology also has tools built in where we know where conduit runs up through the property. We know any void spaces. You can guarantee that the whole place is captured. Nothing was missed. There's all of these aspects of the technology that really create, the way I like to say it is, technology is bringing the independence to the process, because you can't dupe it. It's you can't trick it. And so we're actually not far away. Actually, we're here now. I think it always takes the industry time to catch up with policy, right? Where you could have a consumer using these tools to capture data and information on their home. We also can capture a lot of data and information using the same tools we use to market a property now, to generate dollhouse views and 3D tours and all the things that we do there. This is the same technology we're using to capture the UPD spec, which is the standard spec around data collection. And so now all this information is going to be available from point of list, and you don't need to send an appraiser to go out there. It can all come to us. And I think about the relevancy and the importance of really, in my mind, honing in. And you talk about this often too, right? The importance of honing in again on the highest and best use, so that the industry understands our value that we bring to the process. Because it's not, or even historically, let's be honest, there's also a lot of appraisers who put a lot of commentary in the report to basically remediate risk for them as a data collector, that they're not a property, they're not an inspector, they're not an engineer, they're not a pest expert, etc. Right? So that they don't have any downstream liability. And this also removes them from that, right? So there's benefit there. I don't know how you react to that, or what your thoughts are there.
Again, I'll go back to the users of our services as appraisers. Why do lenders hire us? Why do they bring us into the equation? It's about understanding the collateral value risk. And there are things that historically appraisers have paid attention to that in the end, they may not necessarily affect the lender's risk if the lender knows about these things from the beginning as they price the loan. And there's so much data available that lenders in the secondary market is using. Fannie and Freddie are using data from all kinds of sources, including the UCDP from the UAD. They know a lot about properties, and they combine this data with other data they have, and they can assess the risk. And as we've seen them do frequently, they'll say, hey, we know enough about this property that we don't need a valuation in this case, or we don't need a physical data collection inspection type service. We can assess the risk and price the loan effectively, and that benefits the consumer, which is who they're trying to serve. And if we can provide services that our customer values related to that, I think that's a good thing for sure. I mean, it's different. And as you mentioned before, it can be, people can feel uncomfortable with those changes, but the reality is those changes are there. And the other reality is the appraiser is still a critical part of the equation. And as we've been discussing, I think the more appraisers focus on the parts that can't easily be replicated, that aren't available from other sources, that are unique to the appraiser, their value will increase, and their comfort, in continuing to serve their customers also increases.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a quote you shared with me a while ago. Only one boss, and it's the customer. I think that was Sam Walton.
Yeah, I think that's Sam Walton. I don't know if that's perfect wording, but yeah, I mean, the customer in this case is the lender, right? And their customer is the consumer, the borrower. And so, yeah, any business succeeds when you focus on the needs of the customer and deliver what the customer expects.
And I think right now, and let me know how you think, but from my perspective, this is probably the most attention and scrutiny that I've seen on our profession in my career. And I'm not going to just specify around appraisers. I mean, look what's going on with all the NAR settlement and everything. The consumers, the consumer financial, the consumer financial protection bureaus, the DOJ, everybody's looking at these processes and wanting to ensure that they're credible and fair. And appraisers, we have the appraisal bias issue that's been going on the last several years, and there's just a lot of attention on trying to ensure that we have a good solution that supports all stakeholders and all constituents. And another example of that would be some of the recent blog posts coming from the enterprises around support for adjustments and things of that nature. Like what are they asking from us, and what do we need to produce to continue to achieve credibility and value for our constituents?
Yeah, absolutely, a good thread to go down. So the industry, on many fronts, as you mentioned, has had a tremendous amount of feedback from the customers, and from the customer of our customers, from the borrowers, from the regulators, and from of course, Fannie and Freddie fit into the customer perspective because they're the ones buying the loans from the lenders. And so we've been getting a ton of feedback, right? And the feedback to the appraisal industry in some cases has exposed challenges or risks or things that historically were not worried about as much, are now being scrutinized, as you mentioned, and called out for the industry to address, right? So I mean, if we've ever, with whether it's a child or someone who works for us, if there's an issue, you're going to help educate and bring awareness to the problem, right? Don't do that, or you need to do this, or whatever. And that's important. And so the way I look at it, we've been getting a lot of feedback as an industry on how our services are valued by lenders and consumers. And in some cases, there's been issues, right? There's been obvious things that are a problem. And as an industry, we look at them and say, well, there's explanations behind that. Well, that doesn't necessarily hold water in an industry or to the consumers who don't understand the nuances. And at the same time, I mean, is it really okay if there's a wide disparity in results of appraisals for consumers? That certainly we understand they're not going to be the same, but is the disparity okay? And so I look at all the feedback that we've been getting from Fannie and Freddie as they've analyzed the data now. It's no longer just a subjective sampling of their opinion. It's the vast majority of transactions, again, pertaining to the residential world, it's the vast majority of transactions are they're able to see the results and compare. And Fannie and Freddie have done a great job, in my opinion, of raising to the surface the most important things and that we as an industry need to focus on and address. And these are things that are of concern to them as a client. And the more we can address those, the more important our services will be. I mean, it stands to reason too. If we don't address their concerns, then they might look for a solution that does. And so I think that's where we have risk, where as an industry, we need to really hone in and focus on that feedback and make sure that our tools and our processes and our approaches are legitimately lining up with the expectations of our customers.
I think it's super important. I know oftentimes change is hard for everybody, and so I understand the perspective and sometimes the criticism that even myself personally receive from others in the profession, that we're actually we're threatening the profession by pushing for this change, but it's actually quite different from our own perspective, right, Shawn? Is we really believe this is a critically important part to keep our profession relevant. And
Absolutely.
if we don't adapt and utilize the tools that are available to bring credibility and to provide the results that our customers are asking for, that's when it becomes a bigger risk, and not relying only on the fact that there's regulation that requires the use of appraisers today, which is the scary part. That's probably one strike of a pen, right? So to change that, and I like to use the example here often with Uber and Lyft compared to taxi cabs, right? Like taxi cab drivers for a lot of years thought that the regulations were what were going to protect them. But what have the consumers chosen? They've chosen a better experience, right? And I don't know about you, but anytime I fly, we both travel a lot. When we go to the airport and we get to whatever town we're in, it's pretty rare we're getting in a taxi cab. We're probably getting in an Uber. It's a better experience. And so we need to provide that experience to our constituents, and we need to be relevant and make sure we're not just thinking about the requirements and the regulations. And maybe dive into that a little bit, Shawn, on the regulation side and the federally related transactions and how all that works.
Sure. Yeah. And we've also started to see, in my observation anyway, Scott, that to your taxi analogy, we've seen the taxi companies adapting to Uber style models where, they now have a different approach, that it's no longer, there's still the traditional taxi stand, of course, but you can utilize an app-based approach in many cases. So in that case, the industry had to adapt to what the consumer wanted. And that's, it's a good lesson there. And as you mentioned before about the investment in the industry, certainly here at CoreLogic, we have many customers who are appraisers and lenders, and we're investing significantly in the appraisal process. The new uniform appraisal data set and all of the supporting infrastructure there. Our commitment is to fully support the needs of our clients and our appraiser clients and partners, and making sure that all of the tools that they need to be successful are there. So we're certainly supportive of that.
And I think that shows too, thinking about it from the other perspective, is that I think that the industry does think appraisers are important. I think they absolutely value what the appraisers bring to the process. And I think it's our opportunity. When I get most excited now myself, you were just talking about it a minute ago. I'm sure CoreLogic is focused on this intently with their varying solutions that they have in play. But the UAD2 transition is really an opportunity for new technologies to come to play for appraisers to leverage, to help, again, bring more credibility to the process using advanced analytics. One of the things that I think even today, there's technology, multitude of technology out there to do now that the GSEs are asking for appraisers to support their market adjustments, make market adjustments. First of all, you have to make them, right? We've been in this crazy market over the last 2 years. We know there's a lot of movement. You need to do a market analysis and you have to make adjustments, and then you have to show your support for those adjustments. And there's a lot of tools to do that now, to make that happen. But what we have seen is not all do that. And I also think it helps bring the kind of cream to the top when you're able to start producing more efficiently and more credibly. Those who are leveraging these tools are going to rise to the top, and that's who the industry is going to go to want to do their work.
Yeah, as you described, that we've seen feedback again from the GSEs that the frequency of market condition adjustments being made on appraisals in areas where market conditions are known to be changing is very low, and not what would be expected by a reasonable person. And so that again creates an opportunity as to how appraisers can address that concern. And there are lots and lots of tools out there that can help to calculate adjustments for market condition and other things, as well as, it's the onus is on the appraiser to use the understanding that they've received in their training and go beyond the standards that they had to meet to just become licensed, to educate and understand how to appropriately do that. And more importantly, to understand what the expectations of their customers are with respect to the reporting of their market observations and the support for those observations. So absolutely, it's imperative. To me, that's exactly what we're talking about. That's feedback to the industry on what is expected by the ultimate customer, in this case, the Fannie and Freddie who are buying the loans. Are we, as an industry, meeting the expectations of the customer?
Yeah, and I also think the rest of the investor population often looks to Fannie and Freddie as the leaders, right? So what they're asking for quickly becomes the standard of what everybody else is going to ask for as well.
It becomes the de facto standard, right? Yeah, for sure. And whether we like that or not, it becomes the benchmark of how we're judged. And again, I remember when I first started appraising, you'd hear something like, well, Fannie or Freddie said this. And it was virtually impossible in early 2000s, even late 90s, to find the source of that information and to verify that. Today I can go to either GSE's website and immediately find out what their policy is and guidelines are for how the underwriter is to look at the collateral and what the appraiser needs to report. It's really cool. And then you take it even further, you can use other tools like ChatGTP and other AI-based type tools to help aggregate that information and help you as an appraiser understand what those guidelines may be, so that as you write your report, you get it correct, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, those are some of the tools. Again, they're so new, they're so fresh, but they're advancing so fast. It's a great opportunity for appraisers to figure out how to use those tools to make their job more efficient. I know in computer programming, I was talking with one of our coders this week, and he was able to use generative AI to code up this screen or whatever it was. He said this would have taken him an hour and a half historically to write the code, but what he was able to do is generate that code in less than a minute using Gen AI, and then go in and use that code and manipulate it and clean it up and drive it to where, take it to the next level of where it needed to go. And I think there's opportunities to do that in our work as well, right? Marketing is another example. There's generative AI use cases in marketing, and it's coming into our world. My son has a tech class he's taken. He was an 8th grader this year, and he had a teacher that had them using generative AI specifically in that class. So they were learning how to use it, in compliance at school, right? You can't use it to cheat and do other things. At least they're trying not to get kids to do that.
As you know,
Exactly.
Scott.
Exactly. But they're teaching how to incorporate it into your day to day, right? So it's important.
And I think, that goes to a question that I think is beyond just the discussion around appraising and appraisal in the future. It's learning how to understand the technology, the capacity of technology to help you is critical, right? I mean, I've heard it said, you want technology to be your servant, you don't want to be a slave to technology. And that takes deliberate effort and energy. And I think that can be, each one of us as humans has a different level of comfort in how we embrace technology. For me, it's natural to embrace technology as a potential solution. For others, it may be they don't even think about that. They think, well, I'll get somebody to do that for me, or I'll hire somebody on my team to do that. In the world of collateral valuation, the future for us will go as well as we figure out how to embrace the technology to solve these problems. And to me, that's you have to just embrace it and really understand what it can and can't do, and use that tool as you would appropriately. It's no different than any other tool that you have in the garage. You're not, if you use a tool improperly, it can be damaging. Maybe we all haven't, but I've pounded a nail in the wall with the wrong end of a crescent wrench because I can't find the hammer, right? It doesn't do good for the nail, the wall, or the crescent wrench. And so you use the tool as it was intended to be used. And so that's a lot of learning, and that's a lot of effort. But to me, that's critical, that whether you're in appraising or mortgage lending or whatever, they're embracing and learning about how these tools can be used to help you do what you want to do. That's a critical function we need to employ.
Absolutely. Shawn, one question for you, as I like to use to wrap up these podcasts, is if you had a magic wand right now and you could wave it and make one sweeping change, what would it be?
I would say that the magic wand would be that the industry would collectively take a step back and look at where we're at, what we've learned in the last 5-10 years, and that we would collectively choose to focus what we've learned as we try to envision what will be coming down the pipe in 5 to 10 years. It takes years to change regulation. It takes years to change policy. Figuring out how we can most successfully employ the valuable resources we have and the unique abilities as an industry, meaning for me, that's the forming of an opinion of value and synthesizing data in ways that AI can't even conceive of today. A human being is still more valuable in that regard, and putting these tools to work, that would be what I would love to see, is the industry really embrace a plan for doing that.
Yeah, and really be collaborative and aligned to be able to move forward in the most positive way. That's great, Shawn.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining me today, my friend. I always appreciate it. I always enjoy the discussions with you, and I love your kind of passionate but yet compassionate approach to how you address some of these challenges that we're all working through today.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yeah, it's a great and interesting and challenging time, all in the same spot for appraisers in the industry. And I'm bullish on the appraisal world, and I appreciate your commitment and energy, and I think we're headed in the right direction for sure.
All right, Shawn. Thanks, man.
You bet.
Well, That's a wrap on episode 3 of the Lending Edge podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Shawn as much as I did. Clearly, Shawn is one of the premier leaders in our space. His passion, his authenticity, his vision is matched by few. Really love his approach. He's compassionate and thoughtful of all stakeholders in terms of how he articulates his vision and creates his vision. And I really just appreciate him spending some time with us today and being able to share his views with all of you. With that said, if you enjoy, please make sure you share, like, subscribe, and we really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to hopefully you tuning in again next time.
Thank you for listening to the Lending Edge podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Be sure to subscribe and follow.